Welcome to Typecasting, where we're typing our favorite fictional characters on the Enneagram and taking on pop culture by the numbers.
I may not live to see our glory.
I may not live
but I
to
will
see
gladly
our
record this
glory.
podcast.
You will live.
That's-
We have glory right now. Thanks everyone for
That's
listening.
the intro.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's your host, Lucas Creighton. Or should I say, pardon me, are you Lucas Creighton, sir?
That depends. Who's asking?
Oh, sure, Burr. I'm Regina, too. And I am so excited for this week.
Yes, that is your co-host, Marjana Tumatua. And when she wants something, she doesn't wait for it. You might say she's nonstop.
Oh, yeah, you could say all of those things. The amount of, paraphernalia I have from my freshman and sophomore year of college, because I do think I represent a lot of the characteristics, negative or positive, that Sir Alexander Hamilton does. And people just would embroider things. I have so many things that people made for me with lines from Hamilton. But maybe that's what every theater kid did. I don't know. I mean, these are not theater people. These are people who just knew Hamilton. So anyway, I'm so happy to be here.
Me too.
Oh my gosh. Let's just talk about Hamilton for a second. That's what we're covering today.
I was going to ask you, I feel like we've probably had this conversation before, but you strike me as one of the people that was into Hamilton before it was cool.
Yeah, I think I probably was. I liked In the Heights. I definitely thought In the Heights was underground, but it definitely won the Tony for Best Musical that year, so it was not underground.
I still feel like there are plenty of people who have never heard of In the Heights.
Yeah, not so much anymore because now the movie's coming out.
True.
But yeah, so I liked In the Heights enough, and then when Hamilton came out, I was not into at first I was just that's just so silly. It's just it's trying to be too many things. And then I don't know what happened. I think I went to Washington DC and I had a road trip and I just listened to it, and then I got to go to all the places that were featured, and I just got obsessed with it. And then on came an obsession with American history never before. I've always liked history, but that was a new setting for me. What about you? What's your Hamilton story?
So I remember distinctly in high school, it was my junior year, and I used Spotify back then. I have since converted to Apple Music, and I apologize because I do know Spotify is probably the superior service. But back when I did use Spotify, one of my weekly mixes or whatever, I would just shuffle the pre-made playlists that they had made for me. And I remember my weekly playlist included Alexander Hamilton, the opening track, which I did not realize it was from a musical. I loved the song, but I listened to it. That song on its own, if you do not know that it's part of a musical, tells a complete story. So
that's true.
In my head, I had just given it this backstory that some to me it sounded like a high school or a college group of friends decided to write a song about Alexander Hamilton's life story.
And you were a Star Kid fan, so I feel that it fits
very much in line with Star Kid musicals and things like that. So I was this is awesome. Somebody wrote a song about Hamilton. It was not until 2 years later that I realized there was a whole 2-act musical attached to that one song, which it makes a lot more sense when you understand that it's not just random people saying me, I fought for him, because none of the other characters that to me they were all just ensemble. So
that
made a lot more sense about 2 years later. So I wasn't like, I was not one of the people who was like into Hamilton before it was cool, but I definitely knew that one song for like a good couple years
Yes.
before the whole musical blew up.
Yes, and I'm from Chicagoland, and so Chicago was the first city outside of New York that got Hamilton. And
Mhm.
so I literally, Saratu was probably my little sister. She was probably like 3 years old at the time. And I remember handing her the phone and just saying, okay, hit the red button or hit the green button again and again and again until you talk to a person. And then me and my brother were on our computers. Like we were trying so hard to get tickets, and we ended up getting tickets. So, and I remember just when I saw it for the first time, I was like, oh, this is so different than like all the
Yes.
other, like it makes way more sense when you can see it. And now, like, I think one of the beautiful things about Disney Plus featuring it is so awesome because so many people get to see it for the first time. And even me, because I loved it so much, seeing the original Broadway cast, it was just like so interesting because I've heard their voices so many times listening to the soundtrack, and then being able to watch them perform it was a really cool experience. So just like for the record, everyone, I do love history. I'm a huge history buff, but we're going to talk about the characters as they are in the show, not as they are in history. So there's some things that are like contradict each other. Yeah, there's some things that contradict each other. Specifically like around race and slavery and really heavy topics like that, and such as that. And Lin-Manuel Miranda made some choices, and I think he can defend them and talk to them, but we're not going to really touch on that. But when I say I love certain characters or we talk about things about them, like we're definitely not touching on the fact that, you know, the historical things happen, but more in the musical. Important distinction to get us started with.
We only type fictional characters anyway, so we are like typing the fictional version of these people.
That's what George Washington was like.
Seriously. Especially, I mean, spoiler alert, next week we're going to be touching on Thomas Jefferson. Not a good dude. Like,
I think he's not a good dude in the show either, though.
I was just going to say, he may not be a great dude in the show, but like very much not a good dude in real life.
He's literally my least favorite person in all of history, but whatever. We're talking about history.
Speaking of Disney Plus, I was rewatching the show as to prep for this, and it reminded me of last summer when we were all in quarantine and the show hit Disney Plus for the first time, and everyone like fell in love with Hamilton all over again. And what I was distinctly reminded of, and maybe just because we were just talking about Glee for so long, watching Jonathan Groff as King George, I was like, oh, Jesse St. James is back. But then, do you remember all of the King George memes of him like spitting?
I know.
I remember all the TikToks.
I don't know
like,
if he
sitting
did
in
that
the front
every
row.
single night or if that was just like a weird thing he happened to do that night. Or like I have so many questions. Well, he's a friend of the pod. So we can just ask him to call in.
We'll just reach out to Jonathan Groff. Feel free to come on. We'll type King George with you.
Yeah. Or any one of his characters. Anybody.
Oh my gosh. I'm a Jonathan Groff special. Listen, John,
we should
give us a call.
That if all you need to do is ask, and we'll do it.
Yes. Hey, all the celebrities out there, all the celebrities who are listening, give us a call, ring us up, and we will just do a whole episode centered on your characters.
Not you, RDJ. Just kidding. I like RDJ. I don't know why I said that. I just thought I was the first guy I thought of. I actually love you, dude. I mean, if you're out there. Okay. Well, I'm so excited. I get to introduce our first character this week. Do you want to guess who it is? Well, you know. Alexander Hamilton. So I'm going to talk about Alexander Hamilton. He is obviously the lead of the show. I think Lin-Manuel Miranda did an incredible job writing him because it is very clear that although he is the main character, he is complex and frustrating, and he is not healthy. But it also, the musical spans like 30 years. So I think that's one of the cool things that we're going to be able to talk about is kind of like his rise and his falls and like how he matures as a person. And I'm really excited to talk about him. What do you think about Alexander, just like off the top of your head, Lucas?
Yeah, I like that point that you make about him like growing up over the course of the show, like starting as like only 19, but his mind is older. And then like you see him like, and I think that Lin-Manuel does a really great job in the writing and in his performance of like being that very like overeager, like something to prove kid who just like is looking for a way to rise above his station. And then like he kind of mellows out and he goes on a journey, and you see him as like the more world weary version of himself, especially in Act 2, which, yeah, I think you're right. Like, he is definitely the protagonist of the show, and he and another character we're going to be talking about today are opposed, but they are both very flawed characters. Like, I don't know that you can say that either one of them are the hero of the show.
Absolutely not.
I think there's somebody else who's probably like the hero of the show, but we're going to talk about them next week.
Too. I think so. I think I know exactly what you're going to say. And I think, but that's what's so interesting. And it's cool because they were actually both nominated as Best Supporting Actor. Both. So like or not Best Supporting, Best Leading Actor in a musical, because they're both the leads of the show, both Aaron Burr and Hamilton, and Leslie Odom Jr. and Lin-Manuel. And so I think it is really cool to just see them go through that, and like what it is to have two different people, and they are against one another, so like neither can be the hero. Oh, I love Hamilton, and I forgot how much I loved it because I kind of get embarrassed now that it's like super mainstream, but like when we were talking about it, this is the first time I think I've been more excited than you have to type an area.
That might be because
you were like, yeah, I'm okay. Well, Lucas, what do you think Alexander Hamilton's number is?
Great question. I texted you earlier and I was like, Alexander and I are going on a journey today because I have been all over the map with this man. I'm just gonna kind of walk through my journey and tell you where I landed, but maybe listen, I'm between, or I've gone around about 4 different numbers. So I've hit like almost half the Enneagram. So there's a good chance that you and I align on at least one of the numbers. My first thought before I like rewatched the show and I was just thinking about Alexander was the type 5. And you and I also mentioned this. I'm not like the war story of Hamilton is the least interesting part of Hamilton to me. Like, I am here for the drama. I am like, I'm a This Is Us fan. Like, I'm here for the like relationships, the love triangle, the familial problems. And so my first thought when I think of Alexander is Eliza saying, take a break. And like, why do you write like you're running out of time? Like, you're creating these worlds you keep erasing and creating in your mind. He like spends so much time kind of withdrawn and in his own mind, and Hamilton wrote the other 51 and all of that.
Alexander joins forces with James Madison and John Jay to write a series of essays defending the new United States Constitution entitled the Federalist Papers. The plan was to write a total of 25 essays, the work divided evenly among the 3 men. In the end, they wrote 85 essays in the span of 6 months. John Jay got sick after writing 5. James Madison wrote 29. Hamilton wrote the other 51.
Like I saw a lot of 5 tendencies in that, in like finding comfort and having kind of the mind palace, and also sometimes feeling withdrawn or disconnected from the people in his life. So that's where I started. Then I actually got into the show, and you know, he is young, scrappy, and hungry. He wants to be remembered. He is so ambitious. And so that's where I moved over to the type 3 and the achiever. He wants to die in glory, and he is all about like how history will remember him. Like, he's so focused on his image and his reputation in a way that I think maybe type 3. However, I have 2 more numbers, and not so.
This is really a journey.
So I went from the 3 to the 1, because we've talked a little bit about the difference between the 3 and the 1 before, and how like 1s are idealists and they're very action oriented, and because they're in the instinctive triad. I was actually reading about the difference between the 1 and the 5, and it was talking about how 5s are thinkers, whereas 1s are in the instinctive triad and they're more driven to action. And Burr is always like, why are you like so gung-ho? Like, why are you always going for what you want? And so that's where I was like, okay, maybe he's that like idealist, the type 1. Where I landed
Here we go.
This thought came about watching Farmer Refuted.
repeat yourself again, I'm gonna scream. Honestly, look at me, please don't read.
Not your interest.
Don't modulate the key, then not debate with me. Why should a tiny island across the sea regulate the price of tea?
Alexander, please.
Burr, I'd rather be divisive than indecisive. Drop the niceties.
Was the type 8. The challenger, where they're like, let him be, and he is like, no, I am gonna stand up for what I believe in, and I am not afraid to challenge you. And Burr saying, why do you always say what you believe? And just like Hamilton always fighting for the injustices that he sees in the world. That's where I was like, okay, no, I think he's a type 8. I think that he like has to fight for what's right, and he's not afraid to make enemies. He says, I'd rather be divisive than indecisive, drop the niceties. And this is what sealed the deal for me.
Like,
and now
perfect.
I'm right? So this is what sealed the deal for me. Then I want to hear what you have to say. The arrow of disintegration for the type 8 when they're in stress goes to the type 5. And when Hamilton is stressed, he withdraws, he's stuck writing, he's stuck in his own head, he can't take a break. I was like, it makes so much. That was the moment where I was like,
yes.
Does Lin-Manuel know about the Enneagram? Because that
honestly,
was like,
I'm kind of mad because I was really ready for you to say 3, and then I was going to come up with this point, and I was going to say how I went to the 5 after John Lawrence died, and I was like so ready, and I'm kind of mad.
Oh no! Wait, so what you're saying is you agree?
I do. I totally think he is an 8. And I do think, again, the musical goes through so much time. And I thought most people would think that his automatic lens is that he's a 3 because it seems as though he's competitive. It seems as though he's charming. He wants what he wants. He's going after it. He never stops. He can't take vacation. And that is all very true. However, I think that is just his gut reaction to what is happening. And as we know, like 8s are very reactive. And I literally 8s are my people. I say it pretty much every episode, and I'm so sorry. But I mean, they hate the idea of being harmed or being controlled by others. And like how true of that is that George Washington wanted to be his mentor. And he was like, get away from me. Stop controlling me. Stop trying to be my father. You're not my father. I am my own man. And they work to protect themselves. And like how self-conscious he is that he's marrying someone above his station, and how can he protect her? Are you ever going to regret being my wife? And she's not. And he wants to prove his strength to everyone. And I think he hears whispers of people believing he's not good enough when that's not necessarily true. People are just mad because of politics. And you see that throughout, especially the second act of who he is. And he has such strength, such wisdom, and is so relentlessly for others. I mean, wow, all of his best traits are like mirroring the 8, and then completely it's amazing how every time something tragic happens in his life, he springboards to the 5. Exactly. It's like Lin-Manuel knew about the Enneagram because he literally he writes like he's going out of time. He builds his own palaces in his mind. Exactly. And how he literally writes himself out of situations and thinks he can give logic to why he cheated on his wife. He thinks he can give logic to how the Americas are formed, or why he might be going against things that we would see traditionally as like, ooh, that's a little sketchy. And then also I think it's cool because I think in strength and growth, he really goes to that too. And that's when we see him developing all those beautiful, long lasting relationships in Act 1. And I think it's really difference between like him being in strength and growth versus like, ooh, not so much. And he's in stress in Act 2. Yeah. And then we see like the 2 and the 5, but at his core, he's an 8. So I'm glad we agree.
I love it. I also just thinking about the Reynolds pamphlet and his choice that he feels threatened or he feels under attack. So he is going to lash out by publishing all of the correspondence and everything. It's, I think, very much that type 8, the challenger. Like I said, I had a long journey to get there, but once I got there, I was like, yes, totally. And I love it because I don't think that he comes off immediately as a type 8. Something else that got to me, and I think that it'll be interesting when we get to Aaron Burr, he is so authentic. He can't be anything but himself. And he just has that. And I mentioned how the type 1s are very action oriented because they're in the instinctive triad. So is the type 8. And I think he is just so driven to action and like driven to like getting things done. And I think he has that fire in him that is indicative of the type 8 too.
Absolutely. And I think like he reminds me, and I hate when I do this and I'm like, I'm typing them as this because they remind me of a certain person. But I do think there's such a fabric of 8s that just like shines out through like, it's hard to like hide them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, I think of one of our good friends who's an 8. And he loves this musical, not a musical guy. And I think this is part of the reason why it's like he can really empathize with this character. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I just realized who you were talking about. I love that. That's such a like great comparison.
Yeah, they're similar people, but I love that person more than I love Alexander Hamilton.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
I just put it on the record. Okay, cool.
Just a thought that I had about Alexander. We can also cut this if we need to.
Go ahead.
When he talks about like when he was a kid growing up poor, he like dreamt of a war because he knew it was the only way that he could advance the station. Like, I was just like, such an 8. I love him. I love him. I think he's very flawed, but I love the like resonance with the type.
He's very flawed, but I also think he so many people empathize with him still. Like so many people love him. You know what I mean?
Very much so.
And I think in a way that a lot of characters have a tricky time doing. It's hard to write a character that you like show them at face value. And then also you still leave the audience wanting more and loving them and thinking they need to be remembered.
I really like how you kind of drew that distinction between Act 1 and Act 2 too, because I think you're right that we see like a lot of the beauty of his strengths and his like abilities, the way that he kind of like commands and leads his group of friends and like sees their strengths and like names them and like uses them to help win the war. Incredible. And then in Act 2, we see kind of the flip side and the other side of the coin and kind of his shadow and some of his like I think more of his like flaws and weaknesses become apparent in Act 2. But I like that kind of they show both.
Well, yeah. And I think it again, like it's always in grief. Like John Lawrence dies. And that's something that's not in the soundtrack. So it kind of doesn't, it's a little disjointed. You're like, okay, it doesn't show you. And also when you get to see the screen adaptation of the musical, it's really cool to be able to see how close they were and how much that affected him. And that's when he goes to his 5. Philip dies. He goes back into his 5. Like, it's just such a like weird, like, and the worst part's being a 5 because it's in his dress. So very interesting. So speaking of our characters, who we love, who we don't, who's competitive, who's in the room, I'm curious, who's our second character, Lucas?
Well, he's not always in the room where it happens, even though he desperately wants to be.
This is our first musical, and every single time we say anything, I just want to break out into song. I'm like dancing in my head.
Mr. Yeah. Aaron Burr. Pardon me, are you Aaron Burr, sir? He is very competitive, very ambitious. I don't want to show my cards right away, but he is like always trying to make a difference. He's always kind of scheming for more influence. When he unprompted walks into George Washington's office and he says like, I can help you.
Your Excellency, sir. Who are you? Aaron Burr, sir. Permission to state my case.
As you were?
Sir, I was a captain under General Montgomery until he caught a bullet in the neck in Quebec. And well, in summary, I think that I could be of some assistance. I admire how you keep firing on the British from a distance. I have some questions, a couple of suggestions on how to fight instead of fleeing west.
Yes.
Well,
Your Excellency, you wanted to see me.
Hamilton, come in. Have you met Burr?
Yes, sir. We keep meeting.
As I was saying, sir, I look forward to seeing your strategy play out.
Burr,
sir,
close the door on your way out.
He is, I think, also really self-conscious and aware of other people's successes. And we see him made, I think, insecure by Hamilton's constant advances. And Hamilton's constant uphill climb. And he's confused a lot of times by, yeah, y'all, sorry, I am literally just saying the lyrics to the entire musical. You're welcome.
I know, I'm like trying not to sing along.
But he is also confused a lot of times by Hamilton and by the way he does things. In a way, I will say I don't think they're the same type, because I think like he just does not understand Hamilton at all. But he also is very charming, charismatic. His catchphrase, talk less, smile more. Don't let them know what you're against or what you're for. So, with all of that said, tell me what you think about Aaron Burr.
I know Aaron Burr is a 3, and I will not take no for an answer. Aaron Burr is one. It was so interesting to me because all of the Enneagram types, it's our negative qualities. We know that. We cover that a lot. It's a tool, not a box. It helps us grow. However, I didn't realize like people had any problems with 3s until very recently in my life. I have a strong wing 3, and I've mentioned this on the podcast before. I'm like, I always thought that was like my positive side, but like there are like some manipulative factors. There are some confusing things, and I think we see that in Aaron Burr a lot because he cannot decide who he is. He wants to be a politician, but he refuses to stand for anything. He changes what party he's in at the drop of a hat because there's an opportunity to be there. I was like so excited for you to be like, I think Alexander's a 3. And then I was like, no, because guess what? Aaron Burr's a 3 and they're not the same. And this is how they're different. And I think we've covered a lot of that already. But one of the things about him is he's very competitive, and he always sees Hamilton as his competitor and someone he's up against, where Hamilton like is just existing in the same space as him and trying to go further on his own accord. And then I think it's not until he wants to duel, not until Burr like challenges Hamilton, that Hamilton's like, oh, we're competitors. Okay, fine. Like, and we are, and I have written everything that you've ever done against me, by the way. I can do that. But I didn't already have that categorized. Like, I came up with it now. Like, I think it's very different. And I love the way Lin-Manuel wrote this musical to reflecting their lives to each other, even though one life ended. And like, again, like Hamilton is just such a beautiful 8, because I feel like sometimes they just don't get justice. But like, even the fact that he's not throwing away his shot and how ambitious he is and how he's working towards that. And in the same way, the way that Burr sees not throwing away his shot as shooting someone else, but Hamilton puts his gun to the air. It's like, that's the competition. I need to beat him. I need to be in the room where it happens. Not because because I need to. Like, there's no even explanation. What do you think?
I agree. I had a couple different numbers rattling around, including the 1, because I do think that he's also an idealist and a perfectionist.
That's true.
And then also maybe the 5, because he is a person of thought over a person of action. Like, he wants to like sit and analyze and like think about everything before doing things. However, I agree. He is definitely a type 3. He's so charismatic. Hamilton says, you're a better lawyer than me. You're incredible in court. You're succinct and persuasive. Like, Burr knows how to play the game, but sometimes I think he gets caught up in playing the game instead of trying to just do what he wants to get done. It's so interesting. His big song, I think, is Wait for It. And he is like willing to try and sit back and see things go his way, which I think is really interesting. But what you were saying about the duel, and I think that is a really cool message to a type 3, is that his like resolution and his character arc is realizing that the world was wide enough for both of them. Like, realizing that it wasn't a competition. Like, they wanted the same things. It's so like, it's beautiful. And like, I'm thinking, I'm having a lot of thoughts come up all at once, but like, he realizes that it wasn't a competition. Like, they wanted the same things and they like disagreed on a lot of stuff. But he's also, like I said, Hamilton is so genuine and like does not know how to be anything but himself. Whereas Burr is always ready to mask his own feelings and his own opinions in order to like make as many friends as possible and try and make friends and influence people that way without ever really like being true to himself. And we've talked a lot about threes. I think that is a struggle of the type 3 in a lot of ways. I think he is such an achiever. And I think even in I think it's really interesting, and maybe you have more thoughts on this, his interpersonal relationships and the way that like he loves Theodosia, but he is he doesn't want to like ruffle feathers. Maybe like it's really interesting that he is like, I'm okay just like with the letters and with like she belongs to somebody else. Like she's married to a British officer. I am just going to let it happen. You know, I don't know. I think that's one of the most nuanced parts of his journey.
I think so too. And I think it's hard because I do think he doesn't want to ruffle feathers, but I think he's like, it's just the difference. And I wonder how much of it's true and how much of it's history, but like, it's the difference between he's willing to wait for it, but he does have an affair, and Hamilton airs out all of his dirty laundry for the literal world to see when he has an affair. I think it's like the dichotomy of like what happened there. And it's the difference between like, oh, this might look bad at me in the future, so I'm just going to be under the radar and like smile and wave and hope no one catches me, versus I'm just going to expose myself. I want to be in front of it. I want to control it. I think it's just like that difference. And I'd be curious to see like what actually happened in history, if it happened the same way. Because I also was very confused, like when Theodosia dies versus when she has the baby, if like the officer thought that was her baby. Like I don't really, like it's not really clear in the musical. And so I would love to hear all of that and what happens. But I even think like the fact when they have children, like they're going to make the world safe and sound. And that's kind of in the same way that it's just, again, I mean, we don't need to keep driving home the point that Hamilton's an 8, but Hamilton like loses his friend. And so he gets to work, where like Burr has a child. And so he gets to work. He's like, now this is when I'm going to make the world safe and sound for you. Like, you know, I'm going to fight for this, where he was doing that before, but that seems to be his fire versus the opposite. So it's just like, and I feel like that is very 3 versus 8 and my own experience. I do not have any text to back that up. So could be scientifically proven wrong.
I don't know that there's a ton of textual evidence for this. I think that an argument could be made for Burr to be a 9 because he does have that like inaction, but also the type 3 does go to 9 in stress and like in disintegration. And I do think that like Burr does have that tendency of like inaction when it comes to like things getting hard.
Absolutely. I think that was part of it too. I think that he goes to 9, but I still think his core is at 3. Well, that is fun. Both of these characters have a great mutual friend. Oh, do we want to talk about his wing? We didn't talk about either of their wings.
We didn't talk about either of their wings. I was thinking maybe we'd just wait to the end and do them all at once, but we can do them. We should probably just catch up now.
Yeah, let's just catch up.
Okay. I was thinking, I don't know about Burr's. I'm going to say wing 2.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
For a couple, the 2 main thoughts that I have about his wing is talking about Theodosia. Like, I think that a wing 4, like in that romantic and in that like no, like those deep emotions, like I think the wing 4 might have driven him to like be with the woman that he loves and like go for it. I also think that the wing 2, I think type 2s know. I have a couple thoughts. Type 2s, like they know what's right and they are gonna like tell you what's right, and like they feel like they do, like they have a sense of pride maybe that he maybe gets, but also I think 3-wing 2s tend to be more extroverted and outgoing and charismatic, and I think 3-wings 4s usually lean a little bit more introverted, a little bit more want to work behind the scenes, and so maybe that's also where I see the wing 2.
I'm curious I don't know what you're talking about when you say the pride or like they know what's best. Because I always think that's the wing one of it too when they have that.
I see that. But I think so when you look at some people call them like the deadly sins of each of the 9 types, the 2's sin is pride because 2's want to help people because they think they know what's best and they like they see themselves as above everyone else and they are able to help everyone else, but they don't want anybody to help them. And so that's why I was wondering if maybe Burr borrows some of that. The 3, their sin is deceit and they're like not honest with themselves or with others. So I do think that that's like more to the key of Burr, but that's kind of where I was pulling that in. It may not be the case when it comes to just wings, but that's where I was referencing like the pride, quote unquote.
And just a reminder for everyone, because I think this is not real. I think he's a 3-wing 9, right? Like, I think he has 3 with 9 tendencies.
I get that.
And
right.
We want to be super clear in the way that the Enneagram works is like, and you can listen to our first episode if you need a refresher, but you have to be one of the numbers next to the number that you have. So if you're a 1, you can be a 9 or a 2, 2, 1 or 3, and so on and so forth. And so I think 2, just because I know he's not a 4, but I also know he's a 3. So like, that's kind of where I came with it. I was trying to think of like any sign of, I mean, I think he gets really frustrated with Hamilton when he's like, you're my friend. How could you not like support me? And like, but like, it's really not that way. There's not really a clear way. And he's like not really pals with everyone else. So I think we just don't get to see that side of him being a 2, but I would say he probably is a 2 more. And like the way he'd do literally anything for his daughter, like be one of the most infamous people for duels in the world, you know, I guess, but I don't know.
This also might be a little bit of a stretch, but something I was also thinking about with his daughter and like wanting to make the world safe and sound. If we look at that as him like in a position of like health or growth, the 3 goes to the 6 in strength and like growth. And so maybe that's some of his wing 6, like talking about security and safe and sound and like protecting the people that he cares about. A little bit of a stretch, but I was just another little like piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. I think we'll just settle there.
Okay. What about Hamilton's wing?
Hamilton, I think it's a 7. I think we don't get to see a ton of it, but I think at the beginning when we just see how he's like making friends wherever he goes and he's like, let's go to war. Like, oh, I'm just going to like leave the country. I think we see him like, and also running away from negative feelings. I think when he finds out that Eliza's pregnant, he just like, or thinking about his mom, like we don't hear anything. We know he has a really sad childhood and he doesn't talk anything about it. Everyone around him talks about it until Eye of the Hurricane, which is like way late. I mean, 75% of the musical is done at that point, maybe 80.
Yeah.
And so I think that he is probably a 7 and we don't get to see it a ton in the second half, but we get to see it in like he's the smooze of the ball. That's not the right word. I don't know what the right word is.
That's a good point. Kind of like the feral tomcat.
And
like,
he's the life of the party.
Life of the party. He likes to schmooze all the ladies and everything. Yeah. I think that's a good point too. The ladies.
This is so fun, and I just can't wait to listen while I go to the gym later.
I was listening to this is gonna expose my lack of knowledge. The song with Hercules Mulligan's big rap. Is it Yorktown?
Yeah. Well, and then also in Aaron Burr when they get introduced to everybody. When lock up your ladies and horses and corsets.
The war.
Okay.
It's like it's like that was the one where he's like he's the spy on the inside, Hercules Mulligan.
Got it.
I was like, I want to be working out right now. I was like, I'm so just like hyped for I love it.
It's a good show. Okay. Well, now this is
next?
Why I had the disclaimer at the beginning is because I'm about to say George Washington is hands down my favorite character of this whole show. I felt his fatherly presence like so much in this and how he cares for the people around him. I felt a lot of comfort in his words. I like remember listening to One Last Time again and again and again when Barack Obama was leaving the White House and we were getting a new president and just seeking comfort in that. And I really love George Washington in this musical and what he represents as the founding of our nation. And I think Christopher Jackson does such a great job of playing him, and he plays them as a person of color, and as a fatherly figure. Like he does the founding father thing so well, and being humble and kind, but also being a really great leader. And so I really appreciate this character. I'm going off on a tangent, but I am a simp for George Washington in the musical Hamilton. Do you have any opinions, Lucas? I
love it. I love Washington. I will say we have, like, not even getting into the typing, I do think he is just like I had a harder time typing him because I think he's such like a perfect character in this show. Like he is just so
a little Mary
flawless.
Sue.
I think in a lot of ways. Yes. I think a little Mary Sue, but I love it. He is just such a like commanding presence, but also a comforting presence. And I mean, his voice, like just,
I know.
I'm a simp for the actor who plays George Washington.
Lucas, what do you think George Washington's type is?
Okay, like I said, I'm a little lost on him. I think he has the best qualities of a lot of different types, and I don't think we see a ton of the negative qualities of some other types. The face you just made may have given me a hint about what number you think he is, which is not where I expected. Wow, giving me a lot to think about with that look. The numbers I have written down are the type 1 because he's a principled idealist and a really good leader, and he like has that passion for justice. A 3, again, because he's such a good leader and such a natural, like in command, like in the spotlight. And then listening to One Last Time made me think he might be a 6 because he's so like forward thinking and selfless in that way of like his commitment and loyalty to like the higher ideal of the nation and wanting to make sure that like his people and his nation are cared for and like protected and prepared for the future. Made me think, oh, maybe he's a 6 because I think he has some really beautiful like forward thinking qualities and things like that. So those are the 3. If I had to like stake my flag in one over the rest, I'd probably say 6, but I'm not going to die on that hill. Unlike
See, that is
Hamilton.
So interesting. Ouch. Too soon. It was 200 years and it's still too soon. 250 years still too soon.
I could have said Philip. I could say maybe Philip would be too soon, but
no, Philip's even worse because Philip is just like a naive little boy, and I love him too. Okay, that is so funny though. Okay, I feel really bad for laughing at that. Okay, I had not considered the 6. I think that is a very, very good point. I think he is a 9. I think and that's why listeners, I made a face when he said, oh, I think he has a lot of positive types of a lot of types. I'm like, I wonder why. One of the things that is historically accurate and not in the musical that I will pull, but I think it probably influenced a lot the character, is that George Washington did not ask to be the first president. He was selected. He did not run. It was someone needs to lead the nation. And they do say that. They say someone needs to be leading this nation, and it is him. And he became war hero. But I think he couldn't stand by and do nothing. But the way he leads, the way he consistently says, history will tell my story. I am not going to do it. I am not going to boast. You do not need to defend my name. Hamilton, calm down. Hamilton, stop yelling at Thomas Jefferson. Hamilton, be civil. Hamilton, we're building a nation. Like, be kind to the French. Like, he is so grounded as a character and understanding the world around him, taking it in and assessing what is best. I think that's why they selected him to be the leader of the country, the founding father. And I think One Last Time shows also he is nervous for like what's going to happen after this, but he needs that rest.
Like the scripture says, everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. They'll be safe in the nation we've made. I want to sit under my own vine and fig tree, a moment alone in the shade, at home this nation we've made. One last time. One last time.
George Washington was not like comfortable being president. He doesn't love fame. That's like why the Washington Monument is not of a person. It is a like stick in the ground, like a very beautiful big one. But I mean, it's still just like, it's just like a four-walled, I don't know what you would call that thing.
An
and
obelisk, I think is the word.
Obelisk? Okay, thank you.
Obelisk, yeah.
Abba, Mamma Mia, coming soon. But I love this character, and I think that he is a 9. And I think so often we're like, oh, 9s are peacemakers, they're side characters. And I think George Washington absolutely is one of those 9s that just like stakes his claim on the world and like makes it a better place and draws the people in around him. And he just sees so many of the great qualities. The thing is, I did not think about the 6. I think that the way he was cautious about the future for everyone, not only himself, but like Hamilton being like, history is watching you and you need to be careful. And I think if he had kept up that relationship with, if Hamilton and Washington had been closer, he might not have made some of the choices with the Reynolds pamphlet as he did, which I think is his like major downfall as a character and in history. But I think, I just don't know. I just felt like, I was like, finally we have like a solid 9 who's just like an all around like killer dude. And that's what I thought when I saw this. But I don't know. What do you think about that?
That is interesting.
No.
I like it.
Okay.
No, I do like it. I just don't think I have a strong opinion about him being a 9 or a 6, like more so. You know, like I think I like a lot of, actually, I don't know if that's true, because I did say I'm not super attached to the 6. I think he has a lot of the strengths of the 6, but I love like even just the name Peacemaker and the way that he is like, he's really good at like delegating and at bringing people to his point of view. Like, I think that's the gift of the 9 is like synthesizing everyone's different points of view and like seeing those common threads. The way that he can convince somebody like Hamilton, who's like, I don't want to be a secretary. Like, I don't want to write. I want to be on the front lines. And he shows him the value of like what his gifts are. And he shows him the value of like using those gifts and being like his quote unquote secretary. Like, I do see some of those gifts of the 9. And so I will, I think, give you the type 9. And I also, because like I said, I was kind of toying with the 1. And I think that like 9 wing 1 makes sense to me more so. I would have said 6 wing 5, but I do think that 9 wing 1 like makes more sense to me.
I think especially in the show. Like, I think.
Yes, totally. I mean, that's the thing. I don't know that like we can use the Washington Monument as evidence because that's very much like a real people thing and not the show.
But Eliza does talk about building the Washington Monument, so that's why I let it in.
Okay.
She's like, I built the Washington Monument. And so she tells my story. So I was like, okay, that's in there.
Oh, that final song.
I know. But see, is it allowed now that I explained my rationale?
I'll allow it. Objection overruled. My objection overruled by myself.
Oh my gosh, this was like my favorite episode. And again, I didn't know my love for Hamilton until I started like doing my research, and I was like so excited. So thank you for listening, guys. Thanks for chatting with me, Lucas. This is so fun.
Yes, and thank you all for joining us this week. If you are new around here, we're obviously like always want to hear your thoughts. If you vehemently disagree with us, or if there's a character that we didn't type that you want to hear our thoughts on, let us know. So you can send us an email at typecastingpod@gmail.com. I don't think we plug that email very often, but it is always available and our inbox is always open. So give us a shout. We'd love to hear from you.
Okay, so next week, we are going to be listening again to Hamilton, and we're going to tell you all of our juicy details and all of what we think about Eliza, Angelica, and then Lafayette. And you know what? We might sprinkle in a little extra characters if Lucas will allow it. But those are the for sure's. Those are
The Schuyler
confirmed.
sisters. Listen, those are the songs that I'm not going to be able to stop myself from singing along to. They have all the best
know.
music in the show.
I think like you can see who we are in the fact that like you're so excited for the Schuyler sisters, and I was like, George Washington.
Yes, I love it. Okay, well, we'll talk to you next week. Thank you for listening to Typecasting. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at TypecastingPod, where you can vote in our weekly polls. Leave a review, and be sure to join us next week when we take on more pop culture by the numbers.